All right, so today we are in What is the Good News, part 20. All right, part 20. We're getting really close to the end here, which means it could be 8, 10 more parts. No, I'm kidding. It certainly could, but I only have a few more references to make. But last time we only got through 11 verses, so you never know, right? Okay, so we're in What is the Good News, part 20. So the good news is the positive, forward-looking message from the above, delivered by one who is anointed and appointed in the role of a prophet, speaking the word of Yahweh with authority. That is the technical definition, okay? Now, what is the good news? A lot of different pieces of information, and we've covered that in the previous 19 parts, all right? Actually, not really. The last couple of parts we've been focusing on, so to what effect should it have now that you have good news and you understand what the good news is? But the first 15 or so parts, 16 parts of this went into all the places explaining what the good news is. All right, now what you were told by the church is not incorrect, it's just incredibly limited to what it is, okay? I mean, Messiah coming, living, teaching, dying, resurrecting, these are all really important pieces of news that are good news. That's definitely good news, okay? But there was a point to it that they missed. Why did he come? What was the point? Oh, to forgive us and cover us? No, that was not it. That was a piece of it. There were promises made in the Old Testament that the good news is these promises are being fulfilled. Okay, there's lots of that covered in the first 15 or 16 parts of this, all right? Since we've gotten into the letters of Paul, especially now here in Ephesians, we've been looking at a lot of the chapters start off with things like chapter 4 says, I call upon you therefore. Since I already talked about good news here earlier, I call upon you therefore to do this or not do that, okay? And so we're kind of still going through that theme here, finishing up the book of Ephesians quite a little bit here. Now, I know you guys are all looking forward a little bit, if those of you that actually look ahead and realize if we get to chapter 6, we're going to get into the armor of Elohim. And I'm not going to get into detail with the armor of Elohim because I've already done that multiple times. Okay, go listen to Be Set Apart, parts 14 through 17 or 18 or 19, whatever it is, okay? We have it in, just look up m.t.o.i, armor of Elohim, and you'll find the teachings that cover that, all right? So I'm not going to go into that depth in this particular teaching. I will cover things that I maybe haven't covered in enough depth, okay, if those things pop up or need more strong emphasis. But I just want to throw that out there. If we do go through chapter 6 and get to it, then I will remind you again when we get there. We are in chapter 5, however. So let's go to chapter 5. Now, chapter 5, we did go through the first 11 verses. I'm going to read them for context. But notice that he starts off chapter 5 the same as chapter 4 as saying, basically, with whatever I just said, I want you now to do something. He says, become then. Become then what? What do you mean? What do you mean become then? Well, because of everything I just said, you should become this. Do this because of everything I just said. Which is why, by the way, if anybody ever gets a teacher out there, you're listening to someone teach, and they're reading from chapter 5, let's say, if they don't tell you what the context is, but like, what is the then? He says, become then. Just like chapter 4 says, I call upon you therefore. Well, what's the therefore connected to? In other words, he said something that is now leading to what he's saying now, that you must know to understand what he's saying now. Okay, and that's what we've covered up to this point, so I'm not going to reiterate that. All right, become then imitators of Elohim as beloved children. Walk in love as Messiah also has loved us and gave himself for us. A gift and an offering to Elohim for a sweet-smelling fragrance. But whoring and all uncleanness, well, by the way, when it says walk in love as Messiah also loved us and gave himself for us a gift. Now, do we also understand that if we do get to the end of chapter 5, it talks about husbands and wives in that exact context. So when we get there, which we know, every pastor, teacher, whatever loves to go to those sections of Ephesians 5, but they forget the context of it. I mean, Paul's already laying it out. He says, look, I want you to become imitators of Elohim. I want you to walk in love as Messiah also loved us and gave himself for us. Okay? But then he says, but because of that, we have a reciprocity. We have an expectation for us to do certain things. He says, but whoring, all uncleanness, greed of gain, let it not be named among you. Okay, which is proper among set apart ones. Neither filthiness, nor foolish talking, nor coarse jesting, nor which are not fitting, but rather thanksgiving. We're not going to explain that again. We did it last time. For this you know, that no one who whores, nor an unclean one, nor one greedy of gain, who is an idolater, has any inheritance in the reign of Messiah and Elohim. So, again, all of this is to get you to understand the focus and context is we want to be in the reign of Messiah and Elohim. And he's trying to tell you, by the way, this is good news. It's not only good news that you can be there, it's good news that he tells you how to get there. I mean, that's good news. So he's trying to tell you, look, you have this information, and with this information, you really don't have an excuse. You should know how to get there. Okay, you know what to do, you know what to not do. So then he says, let no one deceive you with empty words. Empty words would be things that don't bring this about. All kinds of wonderful sounding things that have nothing to do with achieving this. They're not gonna help you get into the kingdom of Messiah and Elohim. All right? Some of you are thinking, well, I don't need any help. I'm already, I already did the Romans road or whatever that is. By the way, I've read Romans many times and do not see a road there. But, okay, you guys have to understand everything has always been predicated on what you do. Okay? Don't listen to the empty words of Christianity telling you otherwise. Okay? You must understand that you will reap what you sow. Okay? And so if the kingdom is something you reap, it's going to be because of what you did. It says God's not mocked. You're going to reap what you sow. You're not going to reap what you said or what you claimed. You're going to reap what you did. All right? So people say, well, I made an altar call. All an altar call would be is making a claim. Okay, you're pledging, claiming, saying what I don't know what people do. I never did one. But whatever it is, it's a claim. It's not an actual life action. Yeah, you had to get up out of your chair and walk up there or whatever, but that's not a life behavioral action. What'd you do afterwards? That's what's going to matter. I mean, anybody can claim they're a child of the living Elohim and then act in any which way they want to act, and act the fool, act stupid, act whatever, okay? And that's what Paul's trying to say here. He's trying to say, look, if you're going to understand all this, then you have to imitate Elohim. You can't be doing all this imitating the world. We have a contrast between the above and the below. Heavenly, earthly, spiritual, flesh, okay? You have that, all right? So he says, let no one deceive you with empty words. So now that you know what substantive words sound like, don't fall for the empty ones. He says, for because of these, the wrath of Elohim comes upon the sons of disobedience. So he's saying is, if you listen to empty words, you're gonna end up being disobedient. So empty words lead you to disobedience. Now, not because they tell you and encourage you to do something you shouldn't do. They're mostly telling you that doing it is not a problem anymore. Oh, you don't have to worry about the laws about pork. You can eat that. So it's not an encouragement that you should go and eat it. It's simply saying, oh, it's okay to eat. So he said empty words are not necessarily a direct instruction to go do something. It's simply saying that something you shouldn't do is, it's okay. It's not a problem anymore. That's empty, because they're not true. You are still going to reap what you sow. You're here to get judged on your choices, on your decisions. Making decisions, the reason you exist. That's an important teaching. One part, make sure you listen to that probably at least 3 or 4 times a year. It's going to make sure you don't lose track of what the whole point is. You know the cool part about that teaching? I don't mention one single verse. Because it's a message to people that know the verses. It's a message to people that already should understand mostly why you're here. Okay? So it wasn't about telling you what decisions to make. Those would be the teachings with the verses. It's about telling you that the reason you're here is for him to watch the choices you make. He says, I want you not to eat pork, and then you have to make a decision whenever it's available to eat. I tell you to keep the Sabbath, and then your boss wants you to work. He's watching the decision you make. Okay? It's all about making decisions. Okay? Now, so he says that Elohim sees people that fall for the empty words as these are the words that cause you to be disobedient, and that makes him upset. It says the wrath of Elohim pours out on the sons of disobedience who are disobedient, most often, he's saying, because of falling for empty words. And you got to be careful with that. So he said, okay, so it's kind of like, if you think about what Christianity puts out there, there's really no consequences. Because once you've made your call, you're once saved, always saved is what they teach you, so therefore, you're still in no matter what you do. That's empty. I mean, that's pointless. Then what was the value in making your altar call in the first place? It didn't change you. He said, become imitators of Elohim. This is all supposed to change you. From the time you came out of the womb until you die, it's all about transforming. This journey is supposed to be transformative. And not just, oh, it's great that I found out this good news that Messiah did everything for me, so now I don't have to do nothing. Which, by the way, your brain should scream that that doesn't make any sense, okay? Because it's empty, right? There's no value in it. Where's the value? If you're a God, what's the value in saying, 4,000 years they were doing all this stuff. It seemed too hard for them, so just forget it. Do whatever you want. Just let Messiah do it for you. That basically is saying he made a mistake. He thought we could do stuff we can't do. And then the empty words people tell you, oh, it's too hard. You can't do it. Really? I challenge anybody to give me one Torah command that's actually hard to do. Seriously, what is that? Is it really hard to eat different? Observe different days? Not steal, not murder, not commit adultery, not bear false witness? I mean, what is so hard to do? Okay? Because they make it sound like, oh, that law. Really? It's harder not to speed when you're driving than to keep most of the Torah commands. I mean, because they're like very logical, simple things. So don't fall for the empty words. And he says, therefore, do not become partakers with them. See, when you fall for the empty words, you partake with them. Who? The sons of disobedience. He said, you were once darkness, and now you are light in the Master. Walk as children of light. For the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness and righteousness and truth, proving what is well-pleasing to the Master. So the point of the Spirit is to prove what is pleasing to the Master. Is that happening on Sundays? Is that what the teachers are teaching? That you should prove what's well-pleasing to the Master? Or are you well-pleased that the Master did it all for you? See, because I hear a lot of them, and I listen every now and then to people screaming and yelling from the podiums on Sundays. And mostly they're trying to encourage you that you should just feel good about yourself because it's all, it's either Satan's fault or Messiah did it for you. So, hey, you're all good. Celebrate. But are they ever focused on what's well-pleasing to the Master? What does the Master want you to do? He wants you to believe in Jesus. Okay, so let's say I do that. What is that supposed to do transformatively, though? What am I supposed to do? Belief is not an action, okay? Now, belief can turn into an action. If I believe what the Master, what I know what's pleasing to him, then I believe that's pleasing to him, then I can say I need to do it because it pleases him. But just believing in something is not an action, okay? Now, believing Messiah, that's an action. If I believe what he said, I believe his expectation, I believe what's pleasing in his sight, now I'm going to take action because I believe him as opposed to believing in. Christianity wants you to believe in. You got to believe in Messiah. But that does nothing for or to you in itself, except you can get some false inner peace thinking, oh good, I'm all good now. Nothing to stress. It's all taken care of. I got my golden ticket. Where do you see anybody talking about it that way in Scripture? Okay, Paul certainly does, and he expects you to do and to stop doing other things, right? He expects your behavior to change. He literally said, imitate Messiah. Well, here he says, imitate Elohim. In other places, he says, imitate me as I imitate Messiah. Imitation is a behavior adjustment, right? If I'm going to imitate you, I'm going to adjust my behavior so it matches yours. That's why Yeshua was here, to show us what it looks like, so we can imitate him. So when it says the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness, righteousness, and truth, proving what is well-pleasing, just understand, the Ruach's job is to help you to understand what's well-pleasing to the Master, not to do it for you, not to answer all your questions, but to help you understand what's well-pleasing to the Master, okay? Now, verse 11 was the last verse we covered last time. Have no fellowship with the fruitless works of darkness, but rather reprove them. Okay, so we're going to get this word reproved again in verse 13. So it's not about reproving, but it's identifying it correctly as to what it is. Okay? So it's not so much that you're going to go and correct it in some way. But we think of reproof, correction. The word really has a better idea of saying, don't have fellowship with the works of darkness, but rather prove what it is. In other words, figure out what it is so that you know not to do that. Because look at how this plays out as we go forward. Verse 12, for it is a shame even to speak of what is done by them in secret, but all matters being brought to understanding as to what it is are manifested by light shining on it, so you can see what it is. See, they want you to be in darkness where you're not really paying attention. But now that it's exposed by light, so you see it as it is, he says, for whatever is manifested is now clearly seen. Again, the word light in English here is not helping us. It's two different words in the Greek, okay? They're related words. But really what he's saying is, again, have no fellowship with darkness. Remember, comparing darkness and light, got a long teaching on that, very important teaching. But he goes, but all matters being looked at, checked out. Reproved has another, prove what it is. You're trying to hear the word reprove, saying, I looked at it to prove whether it's good or bad, appropriate or inappropriate, right? I'm looking at it. And how do I know to look at it? It has to be manifested by light. I got to compare it in the light. I got to see it as it is. This is a light-darkness thing, right? Then he goes, whatever is manifested is now clearly seen. Not just whatever's manifested is light, meaning it's good. It's now clearly seen. You now can see it. You know what to do with it. Because what manifests may be bad stuff, but now you at least see it. This is part of what Abba does in your life all the time. He's bringing stuff out. He's manifesting it out of your life so you can deal with it. He's exposing it, okay? When you had, back in the old days, when you had film, when light hit it, it did what? It exposed the film, okay? All right, so if somebody's hiding in the dark and they step out where there's enough light, they're now exposed where people can see them. And so what he's simply saying here is there's a darkness and there's a light, there's right and wrong, there's what's pleasing to the master, what's not pleasing to the master. He's saying take everything and look at it. Shine it in the light of clarity of vision, not through some dark, clouded, filter of some sort. And see what it really is. If it's appropriate, good. Use it, do whatever you're supposed to do with that. If it's not, don't touch it. Put it aside, avoid it, don't participate in it, whatever, okay? But, this is why a lot of people don't like to listen to these kind of teachings, because it's going to expose whatever it needs to be exposed, and they don't like it. It's not comfortable. A lot of you don't go to the dentist because you don't want to have the light shine in your mouth and show you that you have a problem. You don't want to go to the dentist for that. You don't want to go to the doctor for that. Because they're going to enlighten you with the realities of what's going on in your system. But you don't want to know. And he's saying, no, I want you to, and he used the word here in the English says reprove. I want you to take things and examine them and look at them and prove what they are. Don't be afraid to look at it. Because we're supposed to be figuring out what's well-pleasing to the master. Well, if you don't even understand what you're doing, and then saying, okay, this thing that I'm doing, let me go now compare it to the master over here and say, okay, does this match up? Am I supposed to be doing this? You have to let light shine. Don't turn this into a spiritual thing about light, darkness from that point of view. Literally, take it very, very pashat. You don't see very clearly in the dark. You don't know what something is. You're not really looking at it and paying attention. You're going to bring it into a place that's illuminated so that you can actually see it. Now you're going to look at it openly and go, oh, I didn't realize that all this gossiping and everything else I was doing was actually hurting people and breaking Torah and not imitating Elohim. Because sometimes people bring stuff to your attention and you didn't even realize it. Anybody ever have an experience where you were doing something and somebody showed it to you and you were actually causing some people some problems and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize. Light was shown on that situation. Somebody brought some light into the situation, which then gave you the opportunity to make a decision, which is why you're here, okay? Of course, some of you would immediately just get defensive and claim that it's not true, instead of being open to somebody sharing with you and saying, hey, by the way, you may not realize this, but you have this problem, all right? Whatever that may be. And then your friendships get challenged. Instead of realizing your friend is the one who's going to tell you, by the way, you don't realize this, but you interrupt every time I talk and you don't let me say anything. And they go, no. Why don't you say, oh, wow, that's terrible. Maybe I need to think about that. Okay? Or you do this or you do that. Don't get defensive as your first reaction. Let the light shine on it and look at it and go, I wonder if that's true. Something got exposed. Now, somebody coming from a wrong place may claim you're doing something, whatever, and it may not be true, but don't jump there first. Consider it first, especially considering the source. If it's somebody that you have a close relationship with, who you trust, who you respect, you should strongly consider everything they say. Look at it and go, okay, let me really consider that. Instead of having our pride and ego jump out there and do all kinds of defensive martial arts moves on it, and you're kicking and blocking and punching instead of going, wait a minute, this might be true about me. And if it is, I could probably fix that. I should probably fix that. Instead of just defending as if it's not true and just walking around stupid, being the same way because you don't want to admit you got a problem. But we all do that, you know. But until somebody says something, you wouldn't realize it. You know, some of us get into a conversation and all we ever do is talk about ourselves. No matter what's going on, the topic gets turned around to ourselves. I'm guilty of it at times. Everybody's guilty of it at times, but some of us do it a lot. And would it hurt if somebody exposed that to you and said, hey, by the way, you may not realize this, but you never asked me anything about me. You only talk about you. Okay? I'm serious. I've got people I've got relationships for years with who've never asked me a single question about me. Never showed any interest to ask a single question. But they talked about them. But you got to look at yourself and say, okay, I can't see all of this, but if somebody I'm close enough to exposes it to me, brings it out for reproof, so to speak, to be looked at to prove or not, I should consider it, you know? Some of you have terrible breath. Now, I'm just picking some things that you would never know because people are embarrassed to even say anything to you. But I think if I had terrible breath, and I've had that in the past, I'd like someone to tell me so I could know to do something about it. Okay? All right? If you've got anything going on, you'd wish somebody would say something. But are you able to handle it, though? See, I know a lot of people think that somehow maybe my teaching has changed or something. No, my teaching is now refocused on the next level. The first level was the mechanics. Do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that. Do this on this day, don't do it on that day, don't eat this, don't eat, whatever, just the mechanics. Now I'm trying to get you to do the internal work, the transformative work. Because the mechanics isn't going to get you anywhere anyway. You could do all the mechanics and not transform at all, and it's going to avail you nothing. Okay? So you should want to receive constructive criticism. Okay? If you want to help somebody, don't sound like you're attacking them. Make it constructive. Hey, I really care about you. You may not be aware of this, but, you know, and then share whatever it is that you want to share with them. But you should want to know. And your first reaction should be, I wonder if that's true, instead of, that's not true. Because your first reaction is almost always an attack back, which is really a counterattack because it's a defense mechanism. Okay, your defense is to counterattack. Oh yeah, well, you know, your breath ain't great either. Now, let's say that's true. Let's say the other person has the same problem. Then you say, I really appreciate that. I hadn't realized that. And by the way, I've been hesitant to tell you, and you have the same problem. There's a different way to go about it, okay? First, own, receive, before you then go the other way. We have way too much pride and ego to receive that kind of correction. Constructive information. We'll just call it, instead of criticism, call it constructive information. Because you may not be aware of something, okay? You know, you just may not be aware. You're eating lunch or meal during our own egg after services and everything, and you get some sauce or something from whatever you're eating on your shirt. Are you gonna get mad if somebody points it out? Well, they probably think I'm a slob, but I did this. All they did was say, by the way, you know, you got a little something on your shirt. I'd want to know, okay? But some of us will, by default, get defensive. And by defensive, counterattack is really what that looks like. You know, we got to soften up our hearts and soften ourselves up to be able to receive. Okay, we're all so hard that it doesn't really work well. Because the whole point is that we have to prove what's well-pleasing to the master. Okay? So then he continues, he says, now we're getting into the new stuff here, right? So things are going to get light shown on it, right? Light's going to shine, you're going to see what it is, you're going to know what to do with it. He says, that is why, verse 14, I say, wake up, you who sleep, and arise from the dead, and Messiah will shine on you. Whoa. Messiah is going to shine on you after you wake up from the dead. So he can't be talking about it literally. You see what I'm saying? He said, you wake up, you who sleep, and arise from the dead, and as a consequence of that, Messiah can shine on you. But you got to wake up from the dead. See, most of us are just robotically, mechanically going through our sort of just being what we are. We're not growing, we're not thinking about it, we're just going through the motions, and you're basically dead, okay? Tony Robbins calls this being in state, okay? You have the state that you're in, and it's just the way you are, the way you are, the way you are, instead of choosing the state you're in, or choosing to be in a different state than everybody else. And what he compares that to is the advantage that the few awake people have to do things while all the other asleep people are around them. Because the asleep people have limited, when you're asleep, do you have a lot of choices? Do you have a lot of awareness? Are you paying attention to anything? You're asleep. So you're missing everything else. If you're asleep and you're in a room and things are happening in that room around you, but you're asleep, you don't know. You're not paying attention. You're missing everything. If you're in this room now, you missed half of what I said if you were asleep, right? So whatever's happening when you're asleep, you miss a lot. So those that are awake have huge advantages because they don't miss all that stuff because they're awake. Also, those who are awake are living in reality. Those who are asleep are living in whatever's going on in your brain, right? Because it's just floating around. You could have a dream. You could have some sort of, fantastic fantasy type of thing happening that's not reality, okay? But when you're awake, you're in the real world. So you can respond to things correctly. You're getting correct information. When you're asleep, you don't know, it could be anything, all right? And so he's saying here, look, because of all of these things I just said, because I said that you should be dealing with darkness and reproving these things and exposing them to light, because I said imitate Elohim, because I said all of these things about doing what's well-pleasing or proving what's well-pleasing, he said, in order to do all these things, you need to wake up. Because he says, otherwise you're right now dead. Now we also have earlier, okay, in chapter 2, same letter, so Paul's thinking the same thoughts. He says, you were dead in trespasses and sins. So dead people do trespassing and sins. Awake people make different choices. Awake people don't just do what everybody's been doing or what you've always done because it's whatever you only know from your culture, your upbringing, the way your family was, whatever it was. Awake people make choices. They have the freedom of choice. They realize that there's freedom of choice. So when he talks about, again, this is how context gets missing. When you read here and he says, wake up, you who sleep, arise from the dead, if you have read from the beginning to this point, instead of just jumping into chapter 5 from wherever, like you hadn't been reading the rest of the letter recently, you might forget that he's talking about this state of dead he's talking about in chapter 2. Because verse 5 of chapter 2, it says, even when we were dead in trespasses, he made us alive together with Messiah. Elohim did these things. He was rich in compassion, verse 4. So this is the same theme playing through. Context. So you can't be thinking here, okay, wake up, you who sleep, arise from the dead. You might think that that's talking about resurrection, end time. No, he's talking about right now. Right now, wake up, okay? Any parent has had a child going off, whatever, you might say to them, wake up. Wake up and smell the coffee. Wake up and, you're just going through the motions, doing whatever you're doing. You're not thinking, You're not making decisions. You're just reacting to stuff and going with the flow and being influenced, pushed every wind of teaching, every wind of influence, right? You're being tossed about. It's not just winds of teaching. There may be people in your life that just keep pushing you back and forth, that you just allow them to influence you. Awake people make their own choices. Asleep people let people make the choices for them. Think about it. I'll say that again. Awake people make their own choices. Asleep people let other people make choices for them. But if I do that, my mother will be upset. Or if I do that, my boss will be upset. Why are you letting others push you around? Make your own choice. You're awake, make your choice. But other people may not like your choice. So what? You can't get away from that. If you're going to be an awake, decision-making person, I promise you that people might not like your choices. Not only that, might not, at times they absolutely will not like your choices, okay? I'm not saying all the time. A lot of people might love your choices. But there will be people that do not like this choice or that choice as you're going through life making choices or decisions. They're not gonna like the decision you made. Hang out with a bunch of people, friends, and then you're supposed to all do something and somebody steps up to make a decision, somebody's not gonna like it. Have a family, husband, wife, go ahead, one of you make a decision and see at what point the other one doesn't like it. Not every time. Some decisions I make, Rebinson will love it right away. Other decisions she makes, I'll love it right away. Some decisions she won't like if I make it and I won't like hers. You're gonna make choices and make decisions. They're not always going to be what the other person might do or think should be done or whatever. So don't be afraid to make choices. Well, because somebody may be upset. That's gonna happen. So why don't you just accept that from the beginning? You can't get away from that. It will happen, okay? You cannot avoid that. You should make an effort to mitigate if you know something's gonna upset somebody to try to, bring it about in a way that you say, look, I know you're not gonna be happy with this, but this is the decision that has to be made. Have at least some wisdom and sensitivity to the decisions you make, especially if you're the husband, wife, with kids and family, whatever, or if you're an employer, a boss, whatever, that it may negatively be responded to by people. Well, some of that stuff's predictable. Can we agree? There's times when you've had to make a decision that you knew full well was not gonna be well received, at least not by everybody. All right, so preemptively say, look, I know you're not gonna love this decision, and then go and explain why, but I still need to make this decision. This is why, okay? You guys, when you're broke, and somebody actually has the strength in the family, the husband or the wife, to say, we don't have any money, we can't keep spending like we're doing, has to make that decision, say, no, we can't go here, buy that, do this, no. And the person's like, well, because nobody likes to hear the word no. That's where you might say, look, I know you want to do this, maybe we could do it next year, we just can't do it now. Because we just don't have the money, we're trying to fix this debt problem, whatever it is. Have a conversation that understands the other person's gonna be upset. But understand the context here. He says, this is why. He says, again, he loves to use these phrases that point you back to what he's already said. When he says, that is why, we have to figure out what the that is. What caused him to say, that is why? That, what's the that? Everything he just said. That's why I said, now that goes all the way back to earlier in the beginning of the letter. What he's telling you in chapters 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. He says, that is why I'm telling you to wake up. We got a body that's still walking around half asleep. You just are, okay? Okay, I'm gonna say something right now as far as this wake up. Now, I'm gonna ask you preemptively, if you're not exactly what I'm describing, don't own this, okay? Don't get upset with me. I'm not talking to you if you're like 55 plus or 60 plus, okay? Because you've already made your bed. Now you can still fix it. I'm not talking to you right now. I'm talking to especially the 20 to 40s, all right? Wake the bleep up or you are going to be the miserable broke 60-year-olds that call me every week, okay? Now I'm not picking on the broke 60-year-olds. You didn't know, you didn't have guidance, you didn't make good decisions, you're where you are, okay? So I'm not judging you, all right? But I'm telling you that whenever time I talk to you guys, I I feel like I got to scream at the 30-year-old saying, oh my gosh, do something now, or I'm going to be dealing with you when you're 60. I'll still be here. And I'll still be screaming at you, okay? Because you're just cruising through stupidity world, where you just don't want to be awake enough to realize I can't keep doing this, spending this way, or just not aiming at a high enough income, and think that I'm going to somehow be okay when I get to retire. Look, you don't think that Social Security is enough to pay anything, okay? It's just not. The only way you have a decent Social Security is if you made high six figures plus, and then you know what? Even what you're going to get from Social Security will never match the lifestyle you used to. You understand what I'm saying? Somebody who made high six figures plus for most of their time, they're going to have maybe $4,000 or $5,000 maybe a month or whatever in Social Security, but they're used to living on 10. It's still going to be a cut. But if you're making any kind of, quote, normal income, you're going to end up with $2,000 or less. How are you going to live on that? Okay? Because you can't live on it now. Because you're making more than that now, right? Let's say you're making, $40,000 a year. It's like, $3,500 a month, and then you're going to get Social Security. It's going to be $2,000. You're already struggling on your $3,500. Wake up. So wake up. So what happens when you wake up in the morning? Okay, let's use the analysis. Okay, the analogy, I mean. Okay, so you wake up in the morning, you get out of bed, and then you do some things. You go to the bathroom, you maybe wash your face, whatever order you do things in. Eventually you get dressed, eventually you eat some food, eventually you go to do something. You start taking action when you wake up. But some of you are still laying in the bed. Okay? You're literally, your eyes are open maybe and you're awake, but you're not awake. You're just laying in the bed. Awake people get out of the bed. Awake people then do things. They start off getting themselves ready to do other things, like maybe they clean themselves up, or they eat, put some clothes on that are different than they were sleeping in, and all this. You do some things, right? I don't know what order everybody does things in. Doesn't matter, but you don't stay in the bed, okay? You got to wake up. He's letting you know how this all works, and he's saying, look, you got to wake up. Otherwise, he's calling you two choices. You're either dead or awake. He's not saying there's anything in between. He's saying, wake up from the dead. Oh, he says, arise. You got to actually get up. Arise from being dead. Do something. Okay? You got to do something. The old saying, don't just stand there, do something. Do something. I would be okay with ready, fire, aim. That's my OLA, right? Observe, learn, adjust. You're ready, you're awake, so fire, do something. Then when you see the results, aim. Make an adjustment. Wake up. You keep doing everything you've been doing the same way you've been doing it, you're asleep. You're dead. You need to arise from the dead, okay? If you're not getting the results you want, and you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, you're asleep. Now, once you're getting the results you want, now you're awake and you're consciously in doing these things that you're doing, okay? But if you do not have the results in those 5 major areas of your life, and you've been that way for a while, you're asleep. No, I'm not asleep, I'm upset about it. No, you're asleep. Because if you actually were awake and upset about it, you change something. You do something different, you try something else, you do something. But you don't understand. No, you're right, I really don't understand. I don't understand why you haven't found something to do. But I've tried, so keep trying. Study what people who are successful have tried and how many times they failed before succeeding. Everybody loves to use, Edison and the light bulb. Well, that's a real thing. He had this idea to make a light bulb and failed at it hundreds of times until he finally succeeded, because he didn't have any thought that he wouldn't succeed. Or how many times, we know the Colonel Sanders with the Kentucky Fried Chicken went around to try to sell his recipe, and everybody told him no, until finally there was a yes. And by the way, he was already retired age when he did that. Okay, he wasn't like some 30-year-old guy. He was in his 60s, I think, all right? So for those of you that are older thinking, well, I'm too old now. I don't know. You got a KFC in your town? You do, because some guy in his 60s who was retired decided to do something different. It's pretty impressive, all right? But you guys, what are you doing? You're asleep. You're absolutely asleep. What does asleep mean? You've accepted that the reality that you have now can't be changed. There's nothing you could do, so I'm just going to kind of go through the motions. That's asleep, okay? Why are you here? To transform. Transform is an action. It's an active thing that you do. So you can't just say, oh, I guess I'm going to just accept my lot in life and just sit here and just go through the motions. That's asleep. That's voluntary coma, all right? You got to be actively transforming and growing. There's always something you can do. And it doesn't have to take place with physical action, because some of you are very limited in what you can do physically. So what? Your brain still works. As long as your brain still works, you got lots of transforming you can do. Lots of stuff you can do. I always talk about Stephen Hawking, Man, the amount of stuff that man did, and that man could not hardly function physically at all. Okay, if you don't know who I'm talking about, go look him up. Okay? He wrote books. He couldn't use his body to write the books. He talked, but he couldn't talk. He had electronics that helped him talk. His brain was fine. That was the only part of him that was fine. Nothing else worked. Somehow he managed to accomplish a ton of things. Why? Because he was awake. I'm not going to say I agree with everything he did, but he was awake, so he did some things. You guys who just decided to go and say, you know what, when you're not feeling up to things, what do you say? Say, you know what, I'm going to go lay down and take a nap. Which is fine if you get up and arise from the dead of the nap. Some of you are in a 4, 5, 10, 15-year nap. Okay? 20-year nap. I didn't say this was going to be nice. It's the red pill. It's the reality of it. You want the reality, you don't want the reality. Okay? This is the truth. Paul's screaming at you the same truth. Figure out what's pleasing to the master. Is it pleasing to the master to just sit here half whining, complacently miserable, just running the table on this deal until it ends? That's not what he wants you to do. He wants you to have excitement and enthusiasm and optimism for what's coming next and what's coming next and what are you going to learn and what are you going to change into and what kind of growth is coming. But you don't understand. I've tried everything. No, you haven't. You haven't. You've tried everything you could think of through the lens of all of the being dead. Wake up and see what you might come up with. I'm telling you just got to wake up. All right. Now look what he says here after telling you to wake up. All right. This is now after telling you to wake up. He says, see then, you love the language? He said, I just told you something, so because of that, see then, because you're awake now, that you walk exactly, not as unwise, but as wise. Now notice he didn't just say that you walk exactly, because then people get all anal about Shabbat and this and that and whatever kashrut. They're going to get overly focused on just that part. He says, no, I want you to do it with wisdom. I do want you to be exact, but the point is the wisdom more than the technical part. I want you to technically be right, but use wisdom. You know why I use wisdom? Because some things don't fit into the technical rules exactly. So it requires wisdom. Do you understand what I'm saying? So if you're trying to be well-pleasing and there's a situation that looks a little gray to you, you're going to go lean on the direction of conservative. This is, I'm not even going to push the envelope here, okay? Wisdom is how you handle those moments. You don't need wisdom to know that you shouldn't go to work on Shabbat. That's a straightforward thing. But there are other things that you may be tempted to do on Shabbat that I'm not really sure what to do here. We get those calls all the time. So then you need wisdom. And sometimes wisdom comes through seeking guidance. Okay, you go to somebody to glean wisdom. He says, see then that you walk exactly. By the way, walking exactly For all of those of you in the other Messianic whatevers out there, or Hebrew roots, or whatever you want to call yourselves, he says, walk exactly. By the way, when he talked about in Ephesians 4, that you were supposed to come into the fullness of the completeness and the unity of belief, and et cetera, that does not allow for all of this kumbaya stuff that you guys are spewing out there that says, well, it doesn't really matter if we're not doing everything exactly the same. As long as we just have these few things that I think are important, then we all do them the same, then that's okay. Where's the exactly? In chapter 4, it uses the verse, it says, until we come, this is verse 13, until we come to the unity of belief and of the knowledge of the Son of Elohim, to a perfect man, to the measure of the stature of the completeness of Messiah. Does that sound wishy-washy to you? Or very specific? And what's the measuring stick? Messiah. The completeness, not the incompleteness. Well, as long as we just all agree on the important things, well, who gets to decide which are the important things? Well, I know who does. We already have it written for you, okay? But so Paul says exactly. Okay. I don't think that's an ambiguous term. But we're doing it as imitators of Elohim, as it starts in chapter 5, verse 1, right? So he gives us a measuring stick. Man. By the way, he says, if you're awake and you rise from the dead, it says, then Messiah can shine on you. We didn't cover that last part of the verse there. So what does shine on you mean? I don't know. What has he been talking about just prior to this? Illuminating, lighting up, exposing, showing you. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet. Psalm 119, right? Okay, I think it's verse 105, right? So it's a lamp. It illuminates, it shines so you can see. So Messiah, do we know what Messiah is? Let's see, I know he's the way. So the way will shine on us. He's the truth. He's life. He's the word. Got all these things that he is, and that's going to be illuminated to you. But you got to be awake. Why do you have to be awake? Because you'll miss it. You won't receive it if you're asleep. He says, so we'll rise from the dead and Messiah will shine on you. Oh, okay. Wake up. Do you know how many times you find that in the New Testament, the idea of using the imagery of awaking or waking up? There's lots of warnings to wake up those who sleep. And it doesn't mean those that are asleep in the ground necessarily. You guys are sleeping above the ground. There's those philosophers out there that have said things, or people that just wrote comments over the years that have stuck in society about how, one guy said that most people die at 40, they just don't get buried till 70. Whatever the age was. I'm just picking those numbers out. But it was something like a young age, and then they've already died, but they're still kind of zombies. They're just moving around, going through the motions, usually whining and complaining. I'm going to be still trying to do something before they put me in the ground. I'll be trying to do something while they put me in the box. Hold on, I'm not done. One more thing. So look what he says here. Walk exactly, not as unwise, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are wicked. So then, do not be foolish, but understand what the desire of Yahweh is. So notice what it says here. So redeeming the time because the days are wicked. Well, don't just read it that way, like I have to read the time because wickedness is happening around you, because that was always the case, wasn't it? What he's trying to say is, time's short. Redeem that time. Don't waste any more time, because the times are wicked, and if you don't focus and go back to sleep, you'll end up in wickedness. Because that's where you'll drift into in your sleep state. He said, the times are wicked. He could have said that at any time. We could say it now. We could have said it before Paul wrote this. You could say it after Paul wrote this. All right, times are wicked, which means that if you don't wake up, that's where you end up. You're going to drift into wickedness. Redeem the time. How do you redeem the time? Stop wasting so much time. Make better use of your time. Be more effective with your time. I challenge almost any of you to ever tell me, well, I don't have enough time to do this. No, you have so much time you waste. Okay? Just like all of you that don't understand your finances and then you tell me you don't have a budget. Well, I'm broke. Well, do you know why you're broke? No, because you don't have a budget. Well, I don't have any time. Do you know why you don't have any time? No, because you never mark down or watch what you do. You want to really mess yourself up? I want you to write down every time you start anything, and what time it was when you started it. I don't care if it was watching TV, doing something on your phone, doing Facebook, doing whatever, doing your job, eating a meal. Write down the time you start anything and how many minutes it was when you stopped doing it. And get a sense of how much time you actually spend doing stuff. Do that for a week. That'll mess you up. You have no idea. It's just like I used to do this when I was a personal trainer. I used to have my clients write down everything that went in their mouth, whether it was eating or drinking, whatever the food or beverage was, write it down and write down how much of it, right? I ate 5 donuts, I ate a sandwich, I ate pizza, whatever it was. I just write it down. I had a salad, I had whatever, okay? How much of it did you have, what was in it, etc. And then at the end of a week, they'd be like, oh my gosh, I had no idea I ate so much of this or this or this. Just like when people make a budget, they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I was spending so much money on this, this, and this. How many of you would admit you don't know how many paid subscriptions you have right now? Okay? More hands should go up. Most of you don't know how many you have, okay? But you have them, but you have no idea. Every month that money goes out. Netflix, Paramount Plus, Apple this, whatever, Spotify, all right? All these things are just going out there all the time. And you don't even know because you're asleep, at least in that area, right? So you got to wake up. He's telling you, look, if you don't wake up, you're going to end up in the wicked side of things. You're not going to redeem the time. You're going to be foolish, and you're not going to understand what the desire of Yahweh is. Because you have to be wise and awake, he's saying, to then redeem the time and understand what Yahweh's desire is. Am I missing the point here? Am I getting it wrong? Isn't that what he's saying? He says, then do not be foolish, but understand what the desire of Yahweh is. What is it? That you're awake and you're imitating him. He says, do not be drunk with wine in which is loose behavior, but be filled with the Spirit. So what's he there? What is he comparing there? Clarity of mind. When you are drunk, you are not thinking straight. You're also less inhibited, so you don't have the control mechanisms of right and wrong. Okay, those restrictor plates are disengaged, all right? But he says when you're filled with the Spirit, what Spirit? The Spirit of truth, the Spirit of Messiah. You're thinking straight, you're awake. So what does drinking do? What does smoking pot do? What does all these other things do? It takes your mind and puts you asleep to some degree. Now, I'm not saying that, especially with the marijuana, that there might not be a medicinal thing that helps you with whatever, but just be careful to understand that these are things that do also have a side effect of putting you to sleep. I don't mean literally, not that you're gonna pass out and go to sleep, but it dulls other awarenesses, okay? Now, some of you are going to say, oh, no, when I smoke, I get all this other awarenesses. Well, I don't know where that's coming from, but the straight reality awareness, okay, is dulled, okay? So he's saying, look, he said, do not do these things because inside of this is loose behavior. What is loose behavior? Meaning it's less controlled, okay? Otherwise, we use culture to decide what loose is. Oh, that woman's loose, that man is loose. No, it's talking about it's less controlled behavior, okay? All right, when I hold something tight or if I hold it loose, which has more freedom of movement? Loose, right? And so it's less restricted. He says, so don't do these things. He says, speak to each other in psalms and songs of praise and spiritual songs, singing and striking the strings in your heart to the Master, giving thanks always for all to Elohim the Father in the name of our Master Yeshua, Messiah. Okay? So he wants us to focus. See, there's a focus problem too. Focus on all these good things. Paul says that in a few of his letters, on what is good and what is praiseworthy, everything. Focus on these, all right? Why do you focus on all these negative things? I had somebody I talked to recently, actually lots of people I talked to recently, that have this same big problem. If you're upset, depressed, and all these other things, the problem is your focus. Now, I'm not talking about those of you with actual chemical imbalances or whatever, okay? Then the problem may be your medication's off, all right? And I don't mean that flippantly, that might be the case. But for all of you, you're in that place you're in and stay in that place because that's what you focus on. Well, I don't know what to do. You have to find some way to redirect your focus. I challenged everybody the other day. Every morning you wake up, every night before you go to bed, force yourself to write down or come up with and say out loud 10 things that you appreciate in your life right now. Well, I can't come up with 10. Yes, you can. Force yourself to sit there till you come up with 10. Even if it's just the idea that you're awake making this list, okay, that you're not dead yet. Come up with something. And it'll get easier and easier when you start doing it. And you don't have to come up with different ones each day, although you should challenge yourself to see if you can come up with some new ones, just to keep you awake, so don't get into a little rut with the old ones. And try to feel the appreciation and the gratitude for those things. Focus on those things. You know, Messiah, it says, he took all of that brutality when they were, scourging him and everything else, and he took it without a problem, not so much without a problem. He took it because of his focus on what was coming next, right? That's literally what it says, because he knew what was coming afterwards. Well, you also know what's coming afterwards. You have that hope, same hope he did. Right? You're not going to sit at the right hand, but you're still going to have the same eternal life, the same, all the similar things. Why is that not enough to motivate you to handle all the terrible things you have to deal with now? But you don't understand, I'm miserable. Well, because you focus on everything that makes you miserable. Stop focusing on it. But it's so real to me. Well, make the other stuff more real. It's still real. All the stuff you can appreciate is real. You just don't want to focus on it. Focus on it. Elder can tell you, and everybody in my family, anybody who knows me well enough can tell you, I am almost never, if not never, focused on anything negative for more than a few seconds, a minute or two, whatever. I always am focused on go, optimistically looking at the next thing, because my focus is always on positive forward things, all right? Because you could be positive and forward. By the way, when you're doing your appreciation, don't just appreciate the things that are happening right now, appreciate things that still can happen. Your life is miserable right now. What if it were to turn around in the next 2 to 5 years and you don't make it to there because you just gave up? But couldn't it be better? Couldn't it work out? Couldn't things turn around? You know what's really sad? Some of you actually have things in the pipeline that will absolutely do that, but because they're 6 months or a year or two away, you can't wait for that. I mean, you literally tell me about what's coming down the pike that you know is going to fix things, or at least fix some of the things. So why isn't that something you appreciate and that you value in a positive focus? The body mostly is walking around miserable, unhappy, depressed, frustrated, impatient, hopeless, all these negative emotions. Where's the love, joy, peace, patience? Where's the fruit of the Spirit? I think I could have given a better description, in my opinion, of the other aspect that Paul talks about, which would have been things like, hopeless, sad, angry, bitter, all these things that are the opposite of love, joy, peace, patience, okay? And you guys focus on the wrong things, all right? You focus on the wrong. When Yeshua didn't say a word, why? Oh, because he was a Messiah. No, because he wasn't focused on them scourging him. He was focused on that it was necessary to get to the next thing that he was looking forward to. And his focus remained always on what was next, that he knew was next. Do you know that you know that you know what's next? If you did, you wouldn't whine so much. Because even if there's not much you could do to change the situation, because remember I talked to the younger people before, let me talk to the older people. So maybe there isn't a whole lot you can do at this point, except you can focus on the things that you have, that you can appreciate, get your attitude right, do everything you can do. There's still stuff you can do to be useful. You know, just being somebody's friend is useful. Nobody in here has too many friends. Nobody. Matter of fact, a lot of people don't have any. They got acquaintances, they don't have any friends. Okay? Anybody of any age can do that. You know, be trustworthy. We got a lot of people in here with acquaintances they know they can't trust. That's probably why they're not friends. At least not true friends or deeper in that friendship, because we got a lot of trustworthiness problems. Because you guys all like to take other people's information and yak about it all the time. There's no privacy. You know, we almost should have like a HIPAA thing for friendships. You know, just like, go to the doctor's office and you can sign the HIPAA form. Where the information cannot be shared and all this other stuff. To make you sign that when you're hanging out with somebody. Or like an NDA. Everyone would have a non-disclosure agreement. And we wonder why this is such a struggle, right? Now he's saying all of these things to get to verse 21 and saying, subjecting yourselves to each other in the fear of Elohim. In other words, interacting with each other in this way. Fear of Elohim. What is fear of Elohim? It's not just like fear like afraid. Listen to the fear of Yahweh teaching. It's this deep, abiding, overriding awe and reverence and respect. So he says, I want you to subject yourselves to each other with this level of respect. Okay? That's what he's talking about. Now then he shifts to go into husbands and wives, okay? And I'm not going to get deep into this. I'm just going to go through it pretty quickly, so we'll finish this today. He says, look, in this context of everything I just said, now we're going to talk about wives and husbands. Now, I really would rather talk about the husband first, but he goes to the wives first. Because if we don't talk about the husbands first, then it doesn't make sense why the wives would have to do this. Okay? So let's look at verse 28. We'll start with husbands. Okay? No, I'm serious. Excuse me, verse 25. Well, let's deal with husbands. Husbands, love your wives, as Messiah also did love the assembly and gave himself for it. So imitate Elohim. So he's making a connection, an analogy for you. Husbands, I want you to love your wives in the same way that Messiah loves you. All right? He says, and gave himself for it. Guys, are you giving yourself for your wives? Are you laying down your life for her? Are you doing, you understand? He's giving you the analogy of what it looks like. As Messiah did for the assembly, you should be doing for your wife. If you wouldn't do that for your wife, why'd you marry her? Seriously. Why would you marry somebody that you're not willing to do this for? And ladies, I'm going to get on you in the next second, okay? But he says, as Messiah, and gave himself for it in order, now this is why Messiah did this, in order to set it apart and cleanse it with the washing of the water by the word. That doesn't say that husbands, you need to go ahead and, scripture, impose scripture on your wives and everything else. He's saying through loving them and giving of yourself, this will help set them apart and wash them with the water of the word of what you're doing, okay? This guidance has nothing to do with her. The guidance for her is about her, okay? He says, in order to present it to himself a splendid assembly, not having spot or wrinkle or any sort, but that it might be set apart and blameless. Now again, this is not about her. This is about you, husbands. Do these things because doing these things make the best availability for this to play out. Not because you are supposed to correct her and you're supposed to set her straight and you're supposed to do all these things. All right? You're supposed to lead. Okay? So in this way, husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but feeds and cherishes it, as also the master does the assembly. Now, having said that, I got men that aren't giving their wives enough money to buy food. or take food for their kids, or to buy this and to buy that. Well, guys, get off and go work, make more money, take care of your family. He says here that, you got to feed and cherish your wife as you would feed and cherish yourself. Some guys are out there buying all kinds of stuff for themselves, but they don't let the wife do nothing. I don't know what you're doing. This is your most cherished, I hate to call it a possession, but it's your most cherished thing. It should be. Your wife should be the most cherished thing you have. It should be taken care of, better than your car, better than your fishing stuff, better than whatever it is you think that or your guns, or whatever it is that you love so much that you play with and make sure to clean and polish and everything else. Your wife should get the most attention. Now, bear in mind, not more than she wants. Some wives don't want a whole lot of attention. But I'm saying is, she should get everything she needs. If you know enough to change your oil in your car and get the brakes checked and do all the things to maintain your car because you know what it needs, why don't you know what your wife needs? You got to learn and understand what your wife needs and then provide. Because your wife doesn't need the same thing as the next person's wife necessarily, or maybe not in the same frequency or volume or whatever, okay? But yours is yours. And you need to understand and learn, right? Observe, learn, adjust. You should be, before you even got married, you should have been observing to say, understand this is the kind of woman I'm marrying. So I can understand what I need to do to take care of, cherish, and provide for that woman. Now, if the man is doing this, ladies, so we'll go back a few verses, it says, subject yourselves, verse 22, to your own husbands. To your own husbands. Stop subjecting yourself to other people's husbands. Some of you do that. And also, here's something it doesn't say, but it's sort of, I'll take license here. Never, this goes to both sides, husbands and wives. Never compare your spouse to somebody else's spouse. Never. That should be like a thou shalt not, okay? The 11th commandment. Do not compare your spouse to somebody else. Well, so-and-so's husband, blah, 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 blah. Or so-and-so's wife, blah, 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 blah. Don't you ever do that. You don't know anything about the person you're comparing your husband or your wife to. All you know is what you see in public. And quite frankly, you'll think it's the greatest thing, and then next thing you know, they're divorced and you were all wrong. You thought, oh, they got the perfect marriage. Yeah, well, they don't. Some people are just really good in public, okay? No, really. There's some people that are just really good in public. And you would never know what goes on when they're not here. Don't ever compare them. They are not married to you, okay? Yours is yours, okay? If you're gonna compare them to somebody else, then why'd you marry yours? You should have married somebody else. Don't compare them, okay? Now, wives, it says, subject yourselves to your own husbands as to the master. So subject yourselves means to submit or come under authority of. Well, that shouldn't be tough if the man is doing what we read first. Men, it goes on you first. I don't know why Paul decided to hit the ladies first. I had to hit the men first. Because guys, if you're not doing that, why would the ladies do their part? Seriously. I got a bunch of guys going, well, she won't submit. I said, but what are you doing? You don't make any money. You don't provide anything. You're out there goofing off and looking at women that are not married, that's not your wife. I mean, what is there to submit to? Are you laying down your life and providing for her? Then shut up. I want to hear it. Well, she won't submit. To what? What is she submitting to? Well, I'm the husband. Okay, that is technically true. That's not enough. All right? I don't want to hear one husband demanding respect from his wife and submission from his wife who's not doing his job. Okay? Now you're doing your job and your wife doesn't want to do her part? Okay, that's fine. Okay, because that does happen. But I still got plenty of guys out there want to whine about how they're in charge and their authority. Really, you're supposed to lay your life down for the other one. I still got a bunch of you that get all messed up when I say my wife gets the remote when we're together in the living room. And you're like, what? Well, why should it matter what I want to watch? Is that laying down my life for her? Why should I care? I want to watch something, I'll put on a headset and watch it some other way. I'm going to show preference to her. They got the bigger TV in the living room, and it's got the whole, yeah, you do it. Now, she will at times say, no, that's okay, we'll watch what you want, because she then gives it back to me. But I give it to her first, okay? Why? Because it shouldn't matter to me. My job is to provide for her. See, if you're doing things in the wrong direction, you get the wrong focus, that's where you're gonna get in all kinds of trouble. Your job, men, is to provide for her, not her to provide for you. And when you act like that, you're acting like a woman. And by the way, there's a Rabbi Shalom Arush has a book, and he said the same thing. When I read that in the book, I said, oh man, that's insulting. He said, all you guys that want it to be about you, and this is not, as soon as you turn it about you, you're acting like a woman. And that's not to be insulting to women. Women are supposed to act that way. It's supposed to be about them. The man is supposed to provide. But the ladies have to be submitted to and subject to, meaning they have to trust the leading of their husband. So when their husband says, we can't do that, we're not doing this because whatever his reasons might be, and he should explain them, all right? And you don't have to agree with them. That's where submission comes in. But he should explain them. You should be willing to take those no's. But you should be getting at least 100 yeses for the no's anyway. Because men, it shouldn't matter to you. I know you still want to argue with me about that, but that's because you still like, well, I worked all day and I want to just turn on the TV and do what I want to do. Fine. Okay? And if that's okay with her, that's fine too. But I know my wife's been doing stuff all day too. And if she wants to sit back and relax and watch something, let her watch it. Let her pick the restaurant. Let her decide what we're going to go out and do. Okay? Now, she may want me to lead and say, hey, I want you to, go ahead and, plan something for us to go do. And then I'll go ahead and do that. But I'll always want to find out what kind of inkling of what she's kind of thinking or feeling at that moment that might interest her. Okay? You feeling doing something more busy and exciting or more laid back and quiet, right? What are you feeling like? Get information, make a choice. But ladies, you're going to have to submit yourselves to them. He says, because the husband is head of the wife, as the Messiah is head of the assembly, and he is Savior of the body. He says, as the assembly is subject to the Messiah, so let the wives be to their own husbands in every respect. Some of you ladies, you're only going to respect the husbands when you agree with them. That's not submission. Okay? That's not submission. Submission doesn't come in until you don't agree with them, or you don't understand, or you don't like the choice. So you don't say yes and submit because, well, he's in charge, he's the boss, he's going to dictate. No, because you trust and respect his position. Okay? And why do you do that? Because he's laying down his life for you. And he's providing for you. And he's giving of all of himself so that you can have. So if there's a choice of me or my wife, I let her win. If it's something I want and something she wants, as long as it's not a problem, like it'll hurt a budget or hurt this, hurt that, it's always going to be her choice. Now, in the flexibilities of relationships, there's a lot of stuff that she wants to do that I don't even want to do, that it's so great, we've agreed that she just goes and does it, and I just don't go and do it. So she doesn't need me to be there, and I don't need to go, you know what I'm saying? Things I go and do that she doesn't want to do, I can just go do. I mean, some people are a little more clingy, some people are less clingy, or whatever it is. But you got to deal with your relationship with your wife or your husband in the way it is. And so it's totally fine, by the way, guys, if you do come home and your wife understands and lets you have the remote and all that kind of stuff. I just use it as a sort of a teasing thing. But my wife still will come in and ask me, she'll say, look, I was going to sit down and just watch something. Is it okay? I said, it's always okay. Just tell me you want it. It's yours. All right? Now, let's say something happened like 9/11. Some major thing, or the fires, I just found out the fire's burning in California. I may say, look, I need to watch the news right now, just for a few minutes, because I need to know what's going on. Then you can have the remote. In other words, if I have an actual reason, because something important is happening, not because I want to watch my show instead of her show. I could watch my show later, or I could watch it on a different device with a headset or something, if I really need to do that, all right? But if there's a reason why something's happening and I need to know, okay? And then as soon as I get the information I need, I hand her the remote. But also, when it came to, like, for example, getting the house, I told her she could decorate it any way she wants. It's her house. I don't care if I like it or don't like it. It's her house. I'm providing for her. Now, when we went to buy houses, this is the interesting debate back and forth. So this is where you see the guy thing and the lady thing. I needed it functionally to do certain things, okay? I need to be able to have the house, have what I needed space-wise to functionally do some things. She got to pick how it looked, what the paint was gonna be, what the furniture, anything else. As long as I had enough space to do the things I needed, the rest of it didn't matter. It was about functionality for me, because I have something I can't function in, okay? But as far as all the aesthetic preferences, as a guy, I don't care. I know a lot of you guys are like, oh no, I wouldn't like that color, I don't like this, that. Who cares? Why do you care? Let her have whatever it's her house. You're providing that space for her. I just need it to work functionally, do you understand? Like when we looked for the Apison house, well, not the one we're in now, the last one we were in, we had just started the ministry. I needed to be able to run the ministry out of that house. We didn't have an outside building. So it needed to have a basement or enough other rooms that I could use to have an office and all these things. So the first house we looked at, she loved it. It was adorable. It was too small. It wouldn't work. Didn't have the room I needed to do that. Okay? So we had to find one where I could have the functional space and that she would like. So you have to know how to work together. So she had to submit and say, I'm sorry, I know you really love this house, but it's not gonna work. We can't do it, all right? So I gotta find you one that you still like and love and be happy to live in, but it's gotta have what I need to function. It's a need, not a want. Anything that's a want, she can have, okay? I want it to have a kitchen like this and this, that's fine. It's whatever you want. As long as I can have it do what I need it to do, it's a need, so it functions. I'm just trying to give you a men versus wife, husband-wife mindset thing. Guys, it's great if your wives are wanting to please you and give you and let you have everything, great. Let her decide she wants to do that. Does that make any sense to anybody? All right? Some of the guys are gonna get all mad at me. Too bad, all right? Your wives will all be happy. But you're not gonna be happy when I want you to submit and not argue with the no's, okay? If you're submitting, you're not arguing against the no's. You're saying, okay, I guess it's no. And don't sit around pouting and moping about it. Just understand, you got 100 yeses, all right, so you got a no here and there. Don't be spoiled, all right? Don't be spoiled. You know what I did with my wife? I promised her, like all guys do when they get married, promised her the moon, right? And I didn't provide that necessarily. Well, for a little while in the beginning, then some things went really sideways with our businesses and my work and everything. And so we were very broke for a while. And I told her, I'm sorry, we cannot do this, this, and this, but I will fix that. And when I fix it, you'll be able to do whatever you want. But you need to be, patient because we can't do this now. And we were broke enough to move back into a parent's house. That's broke, okay? You gotta move your family into your parents' house with kids and everything, that's broke, okay? It's also very humbling when you have to sit there going, I can't believe I'm embarrassingly this broke. And then you work like whatever to get out of that, right? But I promised her, and so between my working, her working, everything else, she can now do whatever she wants. You know what I'm saying? But she had to take the no's before. Because it's got to be situational, right? Okay? So he finishes off here. Where do we finish off? Verse 30. Okay, we're members of his body, of his flesh, and of his bones. For this cause a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the two become one flesh. What does one flesh mean? It's like when Yeshua in John 17 says, my Father and I are one. And I want you guys to be one like we're one. Echad doesn't mean like they're the same being. It means that we're on the same page with everything. To be one flesh means that we agree. We figured out with expectations how to agree so that we function efficiently and effectively as one, even though we're two, okay? A lot of wives and husbands don't have that, certainly not at the beginning, and so there's a lot of fighting. And there's always that push towards almost getting divorced. And if you can get past that, you can have a great marriage, because then you finally got to that edge of dealing with your junk so you can finally actually fix things. Okay? Sometimes you got to go right to that edge. But the point is, the goal is to be echad. He says, this is why this cause a man's going to leave and the two are going to become one flesh. One purpose, of one mind. They work together like a synchronized, machine. Like they're just perfectly in order, okay? I say yes, because I know whatever, and I say no, she's okay with that. We're just moving forward. We're doing great. We're on the same page, okay? Hard to get there, because you got two human beings doing it. But if the man's doing this and the woman's doing that, it shouldn't be any problem at all. Can we agree? If the man's doing his part and the woman's doing her part, shouldn't have any problem. But do they actually do their parts? All right? This is the great secret. He goes, but I speak concerning Messiah in the assembly. So he's not even talking about husbands and wives. He's trying to help you understand how the Messiah in the assembly works. He says, however, you too, everyone, let each one love his own wife as himself, and let the wife see that she fears, awe, reverence, respects her husband. Got a lot of ladies out there that do not respect their husbands. And quite frankly, I understand the struggle, because your husbands haven't done anything to earn that respect. Guys, earn the respect. Do something to earn their respect. And that doesn't mean you have to be the most successful, whatever. Make the effort. Let her see the effort you put in. Let her see that you're trying. Let her see that you're trying to do the things for her, understand what she wants, needs, whatever, and that you're trying to provide those things. Make her understand that you are trying to do this verse. Well, not this verse, but the previous one that talks about husbands to the wives. Okay? Then ladies, appreciate that. Cheer them on, believe in them, encourage them, respect them. Okay? Respect them. All right, so that's going to cover it. We'll finish chapter 5.